let's introduce our first presenter or presenters. Unfortunately, our published presenter, Debbie, has had some technical difficulties this morning. But you know what? Our inclusive community is just that, isn't it? You know, so what Debbie did is she rallied round, she contacted her wonderful colleagues at her former school, at Cleves School, and Jim and Saab have stepped into the breach at a moment's notice to present on Debbie's behalf. So Jim is the current deputy head teacher at Cleves School in Newham. Cleves is a phenomenally inclusive school. It was built and designed to be totally inclusive, with the pupils with the most complex needs in mind in that design and build process. It opened in 1992, and I can't wait really to listen to the phenomenal practice that takes place within Cleves, because of course Cleves is a school that is available for everybody within their local community, and I'm really excited to hear the innovative practice that goes on within their classrooms too. So we've got Saab Ubu, who is Assistant Head for Inclusion at the school as well, and Jim and Saab will be co-presenting together. Have I missed anything, friends? Great, let's make a start. Jim, Saab, over to you.
Thank you.
Now, see if I can actually do this. Can I just, oh yeah, maybe somebody else is doing it for us. Excellent. Share train. Come on, guys. Help us out here. Okay, let's try again. Okay, yourselves. Right. Okay, if anybody would like to just start the PowerPoint, that'd be brilliant. Why is it not being? It's not me at the moment.
Do you want me to share it for you, Jim?
That'd be great. Yes, please.
Okay.
I can't see myself either. Oh, it's there, screen share, but then I'll be showing my own screen. Marvellous.
Yeah, if you just let me know when you want the next slide and I'll do it for you.
Okay, so it's going to sound like Boris Johnson's medical advisor. Next slide. Okay, I have to admit that I'm not Debbie Lakey, as was mentioned earlier. I worked with Debbie from 1994 at Cleves. I was sort of more of a all over the place teaching and learning person. Debbie was very much the driver for inclusion, so it's a pity that she's not here today to actually to talk about this. I was and still am in awe of all the work that Debbie did. She managed to be a real driver for inclusion all the time. Cleves over the years really changed and evolved over time, but Debbie was always the linchpin for inclusion, was really pushing hard for inclusion all the way through. She's only just retired and is sort of always keeps in contact, and I imagine that she will be backwards and forwards to school as soon as we're out of lockdown. So next slide is ethos and aims. When I came to Cleves, I was quite new to teaching. I was only in my my fourth year of teaching, and it sort of hit you as soon as you got into the place that it was very different from the other schools that I've been into. It was incredibly positive, and still is. And the inclusivity of the place really drove the whole characteristics of the school. I brought my own children here, so I've got not only my own sort of views about it, but also seeing as a parent, seeing your children go through this school. My children went all the way through from nursery all the way through to year 6, and have my oldest one's just been through university. Youngest one's just in the university system, but all the way through, they've been incredibly positive and really thoughtful about other people. Really short story, but my children both had friends who was from right the way across the whole of the diverse population of Cleves. But my oldest son was particularly friends with a child that was non-verbal, in a wheelchair, just communicated sort of through sort of eye contact and things like this. When one of our relatives, an older relative, had a stroke and was put in the same sort of position and non-verbal in a wheelchair, and a lot of our family were very reticent about talking to that relative. But my oldest son was straight in there. It made no difference whatsoever. So it really just brought it down to you're already training children for life. And that was the whole ethos of the place, was all about bringing everybody together, sharing everything, being part of the same community. And as was said earlier, it was actually set up as an school. The school was started really as Newham's special schools were closed down, leaving obviously just JFK. But just generally, it was seen as an inclusive school right from the start, and that between Debbie and the head teacher at that time, the first head teacher, Bridget Jackson Dooley, they really pushed and drove for Newham's drive for inclusion. Right, quick resume about Cleves. It's got about 480 children on roll, 23 places which are reserved for children with complex needs. Sorry, next slide is about school information. I'm going to try saying it without saying next slide. 23 places from across Newham are reserved for children with complex needs. Places are allocated by the early years panel of professionals, which take into account parental preference and proximity to the school. Very early on, Cleves was seen as a centre for parents who wanted to send their children here because of needs, and it's still the case. Still the case now. Yeah. We have really high expectations for all children. Over the years, that's the expectations of what the children actually do has changed. We are more academically driven to a greater extent, but we still have the expectation regarding behaviours, regarding friendships, regarding relationships. We use a personalised approach for children, making sure that their needs are met within this environment, and obviously we're going to come back to that shortly. We're identified currently as outstanding by Ofsted, and it was SEND was identified as a strength of the school. The school has, as I said, developed over the years, and it has been a long journey. At times it's been really difficult, but at the moment it works very smoothly thanks to the people on staff. Next slide, please. Just to give you an idea of how the staffing structure works. It has obviously just changed a little bit just recently with Debbie actually retiring. So now I take there's a single deputy head. I take an overview, a strategic overview for inclusion, but inclusion to all intents and purposes is headed up by Sal, who still has a little bit of a teaching commitment, but is heading up inclusion. Do you want to say anything about your role at the moment?
Yeah, so within my role, I teach children in the morning with complex needs pupils with it's essentially based curriculum that I do in the morning with them, and in the afternoon they are with their peers in the classroom with their personalised curriculum. So they have best of both worlds. So they have intense. So they have direct teaching in the morning by curriculum support teachers, and in the afternoon they're with their peers and their class teachers. So the curriculum support teachers, we have 3 across the school. So we have one for early years, we have one for phase 1 and 2, which is my responsibility, and we have one for the whole of Key Stage 2, that's Linda's responsibility. So we have children that are in class throughout the whole day, and there are children that have complex needs. They have the intense teaching in the morning via us, but all children in the afternoon are with their peers in the classroom.
Next slide, please. And I think Sam's going to carry on talking through this one about your team.
Right, so as I said, so we have 3 curriculum support teachers. So the aim in the morning is looking at the recommendations made by outside agencies. So we have like a sensory-based story that we teach. We have morning massage for the children to support them with the OT recommendations. We also have individual activities based around their needs, so according to their IEP targets. We incorporate all the recommendations made by physio, occupational therapy. We also take on board the specialist nurses with, when we need to give medication, what to look out for, if there's any signs, we are able to contact them straight away as well. And speech and language recommendations that are made as well. But also we do have the mainstream children as well. So we have our learning mentors that go into class and work with children that have emotional needs as such. We also look and support children that need differentiated curriculum as well.
Great. Next slide, please. Okay, so leadership at Cleves has changed. Sorry, message just coming through that the phone in the kitchen doesn't work. But hey ho. Leadership's changed over the years. The beauty of Cleves is that we have an ownership and a loyalty to the place, which means that once one person leaves, the whole thing doesn't come crashing down. We're not totally reliant on any one of us to actually make sure that the vision of it being an inclusive school continues. We have had leadership come through the school that it hasn't been their first and foremost priority, but because of the overall feeling of positivity towards inclusion, we've managed to maintain it all the way through. We've had to be resilient at times, really resilient at times, to actually keep the vision going, but we've managed to pull it all the way through. It's a shared vision. All the members of staff actually buy into it. It's not about the senior leadership team telling people continually that they've got to be inclusive. It's about the whole team actually coming together from, well, just, I'm not going to sort of name it in a hierarchical order, but it is that the whole staff is very positive about inclusion. It is driven by the curriculum support teachers through the staffing model that you saw earlier. It's driven by them, but it's not a forced part of the setup here. It is part of the actual fabric of the place. And everybody knows that we'll all step in, the senior leadership will step in to support however we possibly can to make sure it works. Okay. And obviously it's not just the staff here, it's the teamwork between the staff, the parents, the children, the whole learning community, and making sure that actually functions as a school. If you'd like to go to the next slide, you'll see some lovely pictures of some of the children that we have here. It's always been a sort of policy of the school, an unwritten policy of the school, that we don't really say what a child's condition is. It's just that they are a character in the school. They're a member of the school. We do obviously react to their needs, but we're not hooked up with they've got cerebral palsy, or it's like they are a child of our community. Do you want to talk about any of these guys?
So Amelia, so the first picture is of a child that's in reception. He is doing exceptionally well. He did find it a little bit difficult at the start of the year, but now he's doing really well with his eating and drinking and the advice that we've been given by the speech therapist. Amelia is doing very well with her walking, and she's a social butterfly. She will have a conversation with anyone. We do have residential activities that take place, as you can see as well there. And we also have children that have trackies, and they are doing exceptionally well in our school as well.
Yeah, it has. I mean, that has proved a little bit problematic during COVID, and at times she's been able to come into school, but for a lot of the time she's been shielding. She's not currently in at the moment.
Zoom lessons.
Lots of Zoom lessons. And the next slide kind of just covers what we've just mentioned, that all children are involved in everything that we do. And I think we'll carry on with that. Okay, on to the next slide, which is about parents and carers. Do you want to talk about parents? Because you...
Yeah. So we do have a parent group that takes place every 2 weeks, where parents have an opportunity to talk about things that they are concerned with, or things that are going really well, or things that can be improved. So we do have that open door, open policy, where parents are always heard, and we do try our best to act upon what they want for their children, because they are our voice for their children. So we do work well in partnership with that. We also do home visits as part of the transition process to develop strong partnership. We also, like I said, we do have an open door policy where it's really important that we support our parents in all aspects, from any issues that they have, or with what's being taught in school, or how they can best support their children. But we also have a celebration that takes place, which is the annual review, where we discuss how the children have got on throughout the year, and review targets that have been set, and how we're going to move forward. And professionals are invited to this as well. And yeah, we are pretty good at supporting the families, and vice versa.
And signposting.
Yeah, and signposting support.
Cool. And on to the next one, next slide, which is our staff. Okay, it says, if I just read from it, it says all staff need to be involved and fully committed to inclusion. Now, obviously, when we are interviewing, this is kept in mind, and it's never kept as a secret in an interview, and the people go around and look and see and are brought onto the staff. It's sort of a bit of a sliding scale as to whereabouts they are on their committedness to inclusion. But my colleague Debbie was saying that one person to cite is a person who's been here maybe 7 or 8 years now. When she first came, she was very much people with SEND within her class were a bit of a nuisance. We had to move the furniture for them. We had to alter the curriculum for them, and it was like every year there was a bit of a battle as to which children went into her class. But over the years, she's become more and more committed, until we are in a position now where that member of staff really supports other staff on how to include children in the curriculum. She's very much committed to just the inclusive process, and is sort of quite a big proponent of it now. So although people might not come here as inclusive specialists, the ethos of the place brings people to the same point. You want to add anything to that? No. Yeah, and it's just the bit that you see in red. I think that's really important. that we just, as a whole staff, a senior staff, we really push for people to just think that whatever part of the role, whatever part of inclusion, we're all responsible for every part of it. There's never the part, we try desperately not to have the part where we say, it's your job, I'm not doing that, you have to deal with that. It's always a shared responsibility. Okay. Classroom practice, I think this one's yours.
That's right, yeah. So
sorry, onto the next slide, classroom, that's it.
As I said, so for our complex needs pupils in the morning, they have intense direct teaching with the curriculum support teachers in the morning. And then in the afternoon, that's when they are with all their peers. So in the afternoon, they would have PE, music, art foundation subjects. So the curriculum is adapted to meet their needs and according to their IEP targets as well. But they also are, the teachers encourage group work. So children are working with their peers, not just the attached adult. And we have smaller groups that take place. We have sensory sessions in the afternoon where their peers can join them with the adaptive learning. We also personalise their learning to meet their needs, and planning is supported by the curriculum support teachers so that we have that high quality planning and teaching and activities planned for our children.
I think the next few slides are all yours.
Okay, so next slide, please.
It's a bit of a team effort, this one.
Okay, so in terms of our curriculum, we in the morning we with our complex needs children, it's the curriculum is very much sensory based to meet their needs, and in the afternoon we have a combination of sensory based activities, and again we kind of encourage peer support. So the adults try and they allow the children in the classroom to support the children with a joint activity or something along those lines. So we try and make the experiences real for the children, and we also plan educational trips, and we bear in mind the needs of our children, and we adapt the curriculum.
Yeah, and again, that's been one of those areas that's evolved over time. I know that when I first started across here, it was very much that we were still trying to find our feet with it, and it was very much all children were in all classrooms every day from the start of the day to the end of the day with very little support. And it was just teachers trying to work out how to include sort of non-verbal children within a drama lesson. But because we've been doing it for a long time, I think as a staff, they get very good at it, that they can see that there are activities that really lend themselves to it, and they're the ones that that are set up as whole class activities, and the ones where the children would benefit from sort of more a smaller group or a one-to-one, then they would do that at that time. So it's just been a case of sort of trial and error over the years. The next slide is about classroom practice. Is it?
Training development.
Training and development even.
So this is based around CPD. So we have like a balance of training that takes place, and that takes place on a Monday for an hour. So we look at outside agencies coming in and carrying out training like around the care plans, medical needs as such, but we also have in-house staff that train our support staff members as well. according to the needs of the school as well. So we have like a balance of training.
And it's just, I mean, very, very much of the training is sort of on the job training with more experienced staff, and it's always been a case of whatever member of staff is expected to do any sort of role, and so the staff understand that it doesn't matter whether or not you're a deputy head or the head teacher. We'll all muck in. We all need to be able to cover any aspects of any part of the school. Yeah, next slide, please. Okay, so I mean, as I said before, it's very much. Sorry, strange noise. It's very much a case of making sure that the school continues without one. If we have it so that one person holds all the information and all the vision, that person leaves and we're left with nothing. So we very much recognise that that it's very important for us to build in succession into the systems, that we all share different roles, so that we are all able to step in when people are sick, when people are moving on to other positions. Okay, so we just make sure everything's sustainable. Okay.
So our children have complex needs and they have life-limiting conditions. So it's important for us to support within this context, and key staff identify training and teams and support families and the children in the wider community to deal with loss and celebrate children's lives.
Okay, next slide. Okay, the whole organisation really is not just about bringing children with SEND into a setting where there's also a mainstream community. It's about setting up a school and maintaining a school that is the community or reflects the community. And I think, I was saying earlier, I've got two examples at home of whether or not it's worked or is working. And I just see children from Cleves who are now adults, and I've been working here so long that some of them are quite old adults as well, and they are really confident. They are still supportive. The parents, the children, they are really supportive of community and how our community works together. Our children have always, because of the way that we work, our children have always and continue to be really confident and are able to talk about relationships with all different members of the school community. And it's always been something that people recognise when we have visitors in the school. They've always recognised the way that the children are the best proponents of what's happening here. Have we still got enough time to do the rest of these? I can see we've been waffling away for 35 minutes now. Are we okay for 5 more minutes?
You're still good to go, Jim. Thank you. You're doing great. Excellent.
So on to the next slide, which is can-do attitude or solution focused. Okay. It's not an easy job. There are always going to be barriers. There's always going to be things happening. There's always going to be a family that we think that we've got everything sorted and everything's running beautifully, and then we have another family that comes in bringing a whole set of new challenges, and it's always things that they're not, well, sometimes they feel like problems, but we turn it round to say, well, how are we going to do this? How are we going to actually overcome these difficulties? And it's about being able to talk to parents, being able to talk to outside agencies, being able to work within the staff to just think, how are we going to sort this out? And it's even from sort of our dealings with parents, it's about how we can help the parents with these difficulties, with these housing issues, with how relationships are working across the community, how it's all those sorts of things, and it's pulling it all together. And it is a complex organisation. It's a complex beast to actually try and make it all fit together.
But we try and focus on a solution, and kind of avoid that it's not a problem. There is a solution to this. So we try and be as positive as we can be.
Yeah, very much so. The wider team, which is the next slide. Yeah.
So,
this is the group of people that we work with. Again, it's a juggling act to keep all these people coming into school and making sure that everybody's appointments don't all clash. But this is fairly self-explanatory. Extracurricular, which is a lovely set of photographs next. All these photographs are from our visits to Malden, to the barge, alongside of Fair Play House. They have been really good partners with us over the years. I have heard that the barge is sort of mothballed at the moment. Hopefully after COVID it will come back to life, but I'm not quite sure. But residential visits for us with the children, we've always managed, and it has been tricky at times, to bring the whole population to the barge, to Fair Play House, and it gives those children right the way across the school population a really exciting way of working together to build those relationships, to bond together, and it is such an important part. So I'm really looking forward to being able to do that again over this next, well, hopefully this year, but quite possibly into 2022.
So sometimes, sorry, next slide.
Yeah, and then we've got this is wonderful Newham getting involved in just the sort of inclusion and being a great. I keep saying the word proponent, which is a really silly word to keep using, but it's a really good friend to inclusion, because they run things like this. And if we look on the, have I missed a page somewhere along the lines? Okay, would you like to move back one, please? That's it. So I'm just going to say, I was just going to say, this just shows the way that able-bodied kids and children with needs can actually come together. We've got the child who's in the bottom right-hand corner, Aaron, who was incredibly confident but limited mobility, and we went along, and he really took to judo, and there he is pinning down one of the instructors, and the top left hand. He was really getting into it. So long may Newham do things like that for us. Over to you with residential trips.
Okay, so at Cleves, all children have the opportunity to attend residential trips. We obviously, parents do have concerns, so we talk them through. They can talk to us about their worries and their fears, especially because the children are not going to be at home. So we support parents by allowing them to visit the venues before the trips take place. And we plan with the parents the activities that are suitable for the children, with their input and with their care needs as well. We work closely with the instructors and make adaptations according to the needs of the children. We also, the children are able to call their parents at any time. FaceTimes is arranged for the children, so that they always have that contact with their parents, and parents are confident that the children are safe. And this requires a lot of detailed planning and risk assessments for this to take place. So it's not seen as a barrier.
Okay, and finally, what inclusion means. Now, I mean, inclusion means different things to different people, but I mean, this was Debbie's idea of it. Inclusion is about all children learning from each other, and children with complex needs teach us all that difference is amazing and wonderful. And the next part of it, I can't agree with more, that children from Cleves just see difference as normal in every way. And as they grow into young people and adults, they take a more inclusive and equal society to build that society together. And that was it all the way through for my kids. They didn't see it as a difference. They just saw it as some of the kids were different. It wasn't anything sort of weird. It was just like, well, we all have differences. And as future leaders, they can start to challenge preconceptions. We are now at the stage where we have got members of staff who came to the school. So they are already sort of second generation inclusion people. So it's one of those places that it's all right us waffling about it, but if you want to come along and see us as soon as we're able to open the doors, you're very, very welcome to come, talk to the children, see what you think of it, and yeah, you're very welcome. That's us. I think that's enough words from us.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Sab, and particularly thank you for stepping into the breach at virtually no notice this morning. The story that has unfolded about your school as you've progressed through Debbie's presentation this morning just fills my heart, really. I can't tell you. It's so incredibly progressive and impressive, and most of all, you describe beautifully the experience from children and families' perspectives of what being a truly inclusive school feels, looks like, and also I'm particularly interested in how you show the impact of the work that you do, and we've had a number of questions through the chat that alludes to that. We've got some questions that relates to some specifics of your presentation. So we've got a question around, what does CST stand for? You could explain the acronym and also the role and the responsibilities. Thank you.
Okay, so that actually means curriculum support teacher. So curriculum support teacher works with the complex needs children in the morning to give that direct, intense teaching. And in the afternoon, we carry out intervention work. We also teach in the classes. We also support with the planning with teachers so that we ensure that the activities are planned correctly, and so that we know what the next steps are and what we are working towards. So that's the role of the curriculum support teacher.
Fantastic. Thank you for explaining that. We've had a question around whether there's been any longitudinal research undertaken by virtue of the experiences of children with a complex needs profile, in terms of when they leave you, and whether there's any tracking around destinations post school.
That's a really exciting thing to do, but we haven't carried that out. There have been some research projects over the years at Cleves, and you can actually, I'm not quite sure, they are published papers, but we haven't, as a staff, done any longitudinal research. Maybe somebody could have that as their PhD project and come and work with us.
Sounds like a great idea to me, Jim. That's great. A couple of other questions for you. What would you identify as the current top 3 challenges in the development of inclusion at Cleves School? So what, in your experience overall, what have been those top 3 challenges? I
suppose over the years, I mean, it's positive of COVID, it's taken it away a little bit, is that push towards exam results. That was always a negative on the sort of what we do, because it can't be inclusive. To have a push for higher and higher SATs results is sort of diametrically opposed to what we're trying to do in terms of bringing everybody together. We recognise that we have to have high standards, but it's not necessarily good for inclusion.
Understood. It's about those measures, isn't it, Jim? And it's about the measures being inclusive for all. And I think, you know, you're absolutely right. Some of those curriculum and standards and accountabilities that all schools have a duty to meet,
Yes.
often fly in the face of our ambitions around developing a much more inclusive culture within our educational system. And I think that's the real conundrum, isn't it, really, within our system offer. Yeah. Any other challenges?
I suppose money.
Yeah, money and staffing.
Money to pay staff. So obviously, there's obviously a tipping point between having money which we're just wasting because we've got too much of it, but also that we need high enough staffing so that we can really support the teaching of across, and it doesn't. The numbers don't necessarily always add up.
It's a challenge.
Which is a challenge. But yeah, but we think positively. We're okay.
Good, thank you. I noticed we've got a hand up in our community of participants, so I'm quite happy for colleagues that have got their hands up. Because of the numbers involved this morning, it's quite difficult for me to identify who you are, where you may have a hand raised. So I'm going to open the floor, which sounds like quite a radical move.
Okay.
But I know that I'm surrounded by friends and colleagues this morning. So for those of you who have a hand up, please go ahead.
Yeah, Jane, I've got my hand up. It's Linda. It was just to build on what Jim just said about academic standards. I mean, I think Cleves have done really well to deal with that pressure because, Jim, I think that you are still one of the highest performing primary schools in the borough.
Yes, I think we are.
So while it's a challenge, you still are able to meet the targets and go beyond. So I think it proves that having children with complex needs in a school doesn't impact on standards.
No, I tend to agree.
Absolutely, Linda. And also just to add to that, that under the current inspection arrangements for all schools, you know, it's quite clear in the education inspection framework that no school can be an outstanding school if they are indeed not an inclusive school. So, and I think it's about how do we enable our school leaders and our practitioners to work towards that common ambition of really aspiring to be as outstanding as we possibly can, as well as, you know, continuing to push for a greater level of inclusive leadership and inclusive practice. And that it's an enormous challenge, isn't it, that all of us face.
Yeah.
Jim, Saab, can I just say a wonderful, wonderful thank you to both of you and to the children and staff at your school who have indeed contributed to the presentation this morning too. And I don't know whether Debbie's been able to join us by phone this morning, but if you are listening, Debbie, thank you as well for your significant contribution to that presentation. And I know from the feedback, people have really enjoyed hearing about the Cleves School experience. And I think we all just want to come and visit now. Okay, right, I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, and that's Lizzie Harris. Are you with us, Lizzie?
Sorry, yes, I am. I'm here with Katie. We're doing a bit of a joint effort here.
Super, that's lovely. So Lizzie is currently the head teacher at Tollgate School in Newham, and sorry.
Sorry, it's Monaga Primary School. I used to be at Tollgate. I'm now.
Sorry, used to be at Tollgate. I apologise. Sorry, Debbie. I knew you were at Tollgate. So Monaga Primary School. So Monaga and Cleves are within the same academy trust, and the schools developed and set up the academy trust really with the sole aim of protecting the inclusive offer across the borough. So that's the Bolin Trust, and I know that NDTi will be able to provide more information about that particular academy trust. So Debbie's going to be talking to us again about leadership for inclusion and inclusive classroom practice from Tollgate's, from Monaga's experience.
And just to say, Jane, it's Liz and Katie, not Debbie.
Sorry, Liz.
Don't worry, it's absolutely
Thank
fine.
you, Liz. Thank you.
No problem.
If I could just remind colleagues to turn your mics off, please. We're getting quite a bit of feedback. Thank you, and cameras.
Okay, can you see that?
Yeah, we can see that. We can
Okay.
see the presentation, not in slide view yet though.
Oh, you can see the present. Okay, I've got it in slide view. How weird is that? Okay, one moment. Oh dear, have I exited the conversation?
We can still hear you.
Oh no. Oh my God. I was just thinking I'd left you completely then.
You're amongst friends, Liz. Don't worry, you're amongst friends.
Teams I'm not familiar with. So, oh, there you are. You're down there. Okay, hang on a sec. Right, let's try again. This is stop open share. Okay.
I think if you go into presenter view, Liz, which is usually down on the bottom left of your screen.
Okay, right. Okay, can you see now?
Yeah, lovely, super, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to listen to us today. My name's Elizabeth Harris. I'm currently the head teacher here at Monaga Primary School. But my area of interest and expertise, in my view, has been inclusion and SEN for a very, very long time. My background before I was a head teacher was very much centred around inclusion and SEN. So I'm very passionate about it. It's something I truly wholeheartedly believe in, and I think it's something I enjoy talking about, and I enjoy talking to like-minded people about. So I hope you're going to get something out of our session today. I'm just going to pass over to Katie so she can introduce herself. We're at social distance, so we might have to yell.
Hi, my name's Katie Ives. I'm the inclusion manager here at Monaga Primary School. I've had the fortunate experience of being able to work with Liz for many, many, many moons. So we have a grand history in inclusion and equally share in the ethos that we're going to share with you today.
Lovely. Okay, so I'm hoping this is going to work. Okay, so we are a part of the Bolin Trust, which is scattered over predominantly Newham. At the moment it is predominantly in Newham, but it is likely to build outside of Newham in the future months and years ahead. We're currently a group of 7 schools in East London that work really collaboratively, work closely together, and share a central ethos. Three of those schools have got resource provisions, and you've heard Cleves talk about themselves this morning, and that is an enhanced provision for children with the most complex needs. And we have 2 other resource provisions that are for children with complex needs, but on the autistic spectrum. So at Cleves, you have perhaps children that are profound and multiple difficulties, a range of needs, and in the other 2 resource provisions, you'd have children with autism. Like I said, we've got a long history of inclusive practice, and it's built expertise up in the team. And I think that's the key to keeping inclusion alive. It's having that absolute fundamental belief, but it's also about having the expertise on the ground, people that really know how it works, people that understand it and can make it successful. All the schools are highly inclusive and all have high numbers of pupils with the most complex level of need that typically in other authorities would be situated in a special setting. Resource provision schools, they do vary, but they potentially have sort of about 30 pupils with the most complex needs. And then in a typical school like Monaga, you have between sort of 15 to 20 in the Bowling Trust. Not all schools perhaps would have that many, but we are a very inclusive trust. Okay, I think probably for me one of the most important things as a head teacher and as part of the trust is making sure that the vision and ethos absolutely has to come first. If you want inclusion to work, you absolutely have to have it at your core. And I think one of the things that I'd always listen to our CEO saying as I was kind of growing up alongside him was that these children come first. If you put the children with the most complex needs in the central space and think about those children first, they're our most vulnerable children, they have to come first. And I think that's a really important message that us as leaders, we've grown up around and we've absolutely taken that on board. These are the 5 C's. There are 6 pictures, but there are only 5 C's. And these are sort of core values, core words that drive our vision and ethos. The children understand them and know them, and we expect them to be able to demonstrate them in our school communities. So that was just a few pictures really, because pictures of children are always lovely. Okay, now in terms of ethos, I think we believe that supporting and celebrating diversity and inclusion in school works because it gives all children the potential to achieve. It creates an environment where those with additional needs are not segregated, they're not seen as other, and they're part of the same community of learners. And I think all of us know that inclusion addresses negative cultural attitudes and misconceptions about people with disabilities and those members of minority communities. Obviously in East London, we're a hugely diverse community, and our view is that that only brings richness. The more diverse, the more complex it is, the richer our community is. I think probably all those really inclusive people out there will know this, probably off by heart, but this is a statement that I've kind of always gone back to. If I've ever swayed or thought, oh, I'm not sure, this is quite old, but I think it's as relevant today as it was then. And I do think mainstream schools with an inclusive orientation are the most effective means of combating discriminatory attitudes, creating welcoming communities and building an inclusive society. I think you asked in the previous presentation about the challenges of inclusion, and sometimes you might have national political changes and influences that draw you away from an inclusive orientation, and I think sometimes you have to go back right to the core values, right to the ethos, to make sure you are making the right decisions for your establishment, for your children, and this is something I always come back to. And do feel like you can interrupt me at any point, because I do feel at the moment I'm just talking to a computer screen. But
we will, Liz, don't worry, we will.
Okay. Okay. Now, rightly or wrongly, head teachers, leaders across the country are driven and influenced by the movements and views of Ofsted. Now, this has been really nice. In 2021, we've got Ofsted coming out and saying loudly that inclusion is important for Ofsted. Very recently, Katie went to see Chris Pollitt, speak, who pretty much is training Ofsted inspectors around this area, and we were really heartened by some of the things we've heard. And I think it's just really important that we remember that when they are in our schools, that they are making a judgment on meeting the needs of all of the pupils. Yes, achievement is important and we don't compromise on standards, but it's for every child. The you know, they evaluate all of those things. So Katie's going to just chat through some of the bits from our recent Ofsted understanding.
Yes, so Chris Pollett was somebody I had the privilege of listening to, which outlined all of the statutory guidance that is embedded within the SEN Code of Practice, and then what that now means in terms of Ofsted judgments within a school. So within the SEN Code of Practice, it does say that schools must ensure that children with SEN engage in the activities of the school alongside pupils who do not have SEND. So this implies how valuable this opportunity is for not just the children who have special educational needs, but for also all of the children in the school. It's an equal valid opportunity for them all. Schools must use their best endeavours to make sure that a child with SEN gets the support they need, and this means doing everything they can to meet children's SEN needs. So this is about making sure that you do know your children's needs, you do know how best to support them, and that you're in that constant collaboration with the parents and families, and that everybody's making joint decisions about the needs of the child. And then the last one is the quality of teaching for pupils with SEN, and the progress made by pupils should be a core part of the school's performance management arrangements and its approach to professional development for all teaching and support staff. So this is really important to us moving forwards. It's really important that this CPD is embedded throughout all of the leadership teams and all of the teachers to enable every leader to become a leader of SEND and every teacher to become a teacher of SEND, so that inclusion philosophy can be driven throughout the heart of the school. So in terms of the School Inspection Handbook and how that previous information intertwines into this, the School Inspection Handbook is really important for schools, and schools will follow.
It's like the Bible.
It's like the Bible, what has been written within that handbook. So in regards to the information that was acquired from Chris Pollett, it says that the curriculum is successfully adapted, designed or developed to be ambitious and meet the needs of pupils with SEND, developing their knowledge, skills and abilities to apply what they know and can do with increasing fluency and independence. So this is ensuring that you have that curriculum in place that meets all of the needs of all of the children. Teachers enable pupils to understand key concepts, presenting information clearly and encouraging appropriate discussion. Teachers check pupils' understanding effectively and identify and correct misunderstandings. And teachers ensure that pupils embed key concepts in their long-term memory and apply them fluently.
Okay, sorry, I don't know why that box has disappeared. Have I deleted something? Okay, sorry. Hopefully they're still there. Okay. Now it won't move.
We are, Liz. We're still here.
We're stuck though.
Okay. Oh,
there we go.
We had a freeze for a moment. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, just one moment. Just make sure I'm connecting my pages. Okay. So going on from that, I think that we are driven by what Ofsted say, rightly or wrongly. But I think it is always an important gauge that the Ofsted Handbook is a place where you go to kind of see where you are, whether you're on track. And it's just really lovely that what we've got in the Ofsted framework is acknowledging those children at its core, really. It has given that value. And for me, that's so important. And just like Katie was saying, when you look at leadership, it's really important that every leader commits to the vision. If you are not an inclusive teacher, you're not going to work in the Bowling Trust. If you're not an inclusive leader, you're not going to work in the Bowling Trust, because it just won't fit with you, it won't work for you. And that's the same as we're developing our young leaders. Our expectations are that they are speaking the language of inclusion. So we do lots and lots of coaching with our young leaders. You might be a geography lead, you could be the science lead, and we'll be coaching them in terms of understanding their subject, knowing what their next steps in their subject might be, but also we'll be asking them those questions about, okay, how would you variate this? This is part of your curriculum. How would you variate it for this child? They need to be able to exercise those skills all of the time. We do lots of CPD on differentiation and variation and SEND, which is led lots by Katie, but equally in every CPD session you have, again, it could be a history session. The expectation is within that CPD session, you would definitely cover differentiation and variation within that topic. All monitoring of teaching and learning and outcomes expects the same level of care and commitment to be given to all learners. The quality of teaching for pupils with SEN and the progress made by pupils is a core part of the school performance arrangements and its approach to professional development. So for me, there's kind of two things there. One is pupil progress meetings. We have pupil progress meetings very regularly each term, because we have high aspirations for everybody and we want to make sure that everybody is on track. But when you have those conversations, everybody is included in that conversation. So you're talking about every child in the class. You're not just talking about those children that are verbal, you'd be talking about even your most complex pupils will be at the same meeting, at the same table, and you'd be discussing their progress. The next point for me is around when lots of schools do monitoring and monitor all in different ways. You know, you might do a learning walk, you might be doing observations of lessons, but in all of those things, you wouldn't walk a classroom and not evaluate what the child with an additional adult might be doing. You do it at the same time. So you walk the class, do a learning walk, and you look at everybody. Occasionally, you might do a learning walk specifically looking at whether the needs of those children are being met in the classroom, but you're always looking at everybody. The curriculum needs to be accessible to all. And my view is that if a curriculum is well written and you've got skilled people to variate and differentiate, the curriculum will be accessible to all. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. Leaders work closely with SEND specialists when developing the curriculum. So our leaders are asked to, you know, write aspects of a curriculum or review them, and the expectation is that they would ask SEND specialists or ask questions when they are developing that or when they're trying to variate it, that we would work together on it. Okay, so I think sometimes so there are some myths, I think, around inclusion for some people, not for many, but for some, that inclusion means you're always in the classroom and that's where you will always be. We have a kind of more fluid model, and this, hopefully, this page will help you to see that. So we aim to include children appropriately according to their level of need. We believe it's very important that pupils experience a range of inclusive experiences. So sometimes a child will be locationally included, and that means that children with SEN and complex needs are educated within regular classrooms with their typical peers in the same location, but they may be working on their own personalised curriculum. So they're in the same location, but they're doing something different. Then what we'd have periods of time when they're on linked inclusion, and that's that the supported children are working with their peers in their classes on the same learning outcomes, same learning activities set out for the whole class. And then the other aspect is social inclusion. Children are included in all aspects of the social school, and you saw lots of lovely examples in Cleves's presentation about residential visits, all of the things that everybody is entitled to. Our children will be fully included in. Now, in our setting, the children are based in their classroom. Their base is their classroom. They are withdrawn for sort of specialist interventions around speech and language therapy, occupational therapy, but music. Attention autism groups. There's lots of little groups that do happen, but the majority of their time is spent in their classroom with their core group of peers. This may be not an age-old question, but it is for me. It's been asked of us a lot, I think, and I think it's really relevant. In understanding the breadth of what inclusion means, it's important to understand this question. So what is the point in a child being in a classroom if they're doing something completely different? Now, I believe there's a lot of value in children being in the same space. And this page is really about trying to identify some of those things. So every child has the right to be educated with children of their own age and have role models. And role models are so important. I think there's this myth that if you're non-verbal or you have autism, that you don't learn by osmosis and you don't learn in a typical way. So role models aren't so important. They're absolutely fundamentally important. And I believe that they're a right. You should be able to have role models around you of your age. Every child has the right to reasonable adjustments and a chance to learn in a typical environment. And one of the things I think that's really important is everything you ever learn, you learn by copying. You know, everything in every stage of our lives, when we're walking, talking, in every job we do, in every relationship that we develop, we copy typical norms. And that's where so much of our learning happens. And I think if you withdraw children, they really, really, really miss the opportunity to copy typical norms. They might be copying it at a very different developmental level, but there will be. So we have so many success stories of children who have really complex need that I know have benefited so much from being around their typically developing peers. Every child has the right to be valued equally to their peers and not seen as separate to or other. And I think that's about ensuring that equal value is placed on all pupils. Pupils being together acknowledges that pupils are equally valuable and their opinions and needs are important. Pupils in classes will experience a more complex environment that stimulates developmental progress. We know that research demonstrates that neural connections are stronger in more complex environments. It brings its challenges for children, there's no doubt about that. We've had lots, we'd often have people saying, children with autism need to be in low stim environments, they need to not have pictures on the walls. There'd be challenges to our model, but we know that once you are able to regulate and you've got strategies to regulate, the world unfortunately is a stimulating environment with lots and lots of things going on, and if you don't learn to regulate in typical environments, your long-term inclusion prospects are going to be limited. So there has to be a balance. Sometimes there is a time when you're so dysregulated that you need some time in a quiet space, but I think our philosophy is we want people to be managing complex environments. Pupils with SEND do better when in a setting where more is expected of them. This is our central belief. It won't be everybody's, but expectations across our trust and in our schools are very, very high. And I think when you're used to being in that environment where high expectations are everything, and it might be down to your, it's the tidiness of your uniform, it's the neatness of your writing. If children with SEND are alongside that, our expectations of those children are equally as challenging, and our expectations are high. Okay, being in an inclusive environment increases chances of inclusion in future environments. I think there's lots and lots of research to back that up. We know that if, like I was saying before, if you're used to being in a classroom with all your peers at primary school, you've got a much better chance at getting through secondary school and being able to manage some of the complex environments that you'll meet there, or the transitions. Transitions is a huge issue when you go from primary school and you're not moving, and then you go into a secondary setting and there's lots and lots of movement. But if you've never been in a primary setting class and you've only ever been in your quiet, non-stim, low stim room, going into a secondary setting, I just think would be mind-blowing. Entitlement to a learning experience that respects diversity and enables participation. Oh God, I think I'm talking too much. And maybe sometimes I think it's important to ask ask ourselves questions, and there's no question that comes close to comparison really, but something like, would it be acceptable to not include a child that's new to English because they're not yet ready, they don't have the required skills to access the curriculum? You'd never do it. You'd never dream of putting an EAL pupil outside of the classroom until they'd got enough English to be inside the classroom. And I think that principle is an important one when we're making value judgments on what's important for children. Okay,
Liz?
Yeah.
Jane, I've got a couple of questions for you both.
Okay.
So Adam asks, what would you say are the main benefits to mainstream learners and the school community of having SEND learners included in lessons? And I'd just like to add that I particularly love the slide that we're on at the moment, because it feels and looks like almost a charter for inclusive practice. And actually all inclusive schools create the conditions for all of what you're just describing on that slide. There's also another question which Alphonse has asked, which is around, I'm just going to find, how do you ensure that every staff member commits to the vision that you described earlier in your presentation? So I've got two questions there. The main benefits to mainstream learners and the school community of having SEND learners included in lessons. And then how do we enable staff to commit to the vision?
Liz, sorry, I just muted you while Jane was talking to stop a bit of feedback. So if you can unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you, Liz.
Okay, and can you see, oh, hang on a minute, what screen were we on? Right, we're on that one, and share. Can you see that?
That's right. Yeah, that's lovely. Thanks, Liz. Go ahead.
What I was going to say is I might leave the benefits for children because it's one of the next screens.
Lovely. That's great.
In terms of Alphonse's question, how do we ensure that people stay on message? Lots of that's around training, but equally it's about having a hard line, and we will
expectations that are non-negotiable.
Yeah, it's a non-negotiable expectation, but we'll give you lots of support and training to start off with. So it's a little bit like, occasionally, and it happens very, very rarely, it will sometimes happen with a new arrival family. They will say something like, why is that child in my child's class? They can't speak, or they'll say something that isn't within our ethos, isn't within our experiences. And at that first port of call with a parent, I would be saying, okay, here is the information, this is how we work, and this is why it works, and this is why we are successful. Now, if that opinion was to keep coming back, then I'd be saying, this isn't the right school for you, or maybe this isn't the right school for you. You need to think about looking somewhere else. This is an inclusive school, and that's a very similar message for staff. So we might have someone that comes and only wants to be a classroom assistant, only wants to be a classroom teaching assistant. The very central message is everybody is a teaching assistant for all of our children. You might be class-based sometimes, you may be based one-to-one on other occasions. So it's a balance of training and the hard line that we're not negotiating on it. It is fundamentally what we believe in and what we will be doing.
But also I think the message is just throughout the school anyway. Every child carries that same message, has that ethos, it's just embedded, so that all staff members, if they're new, when they join our school, the children have that philosophy as well and that vision going forward. So it's a whole school approach. It's not just coming from certain members of staff, it's embedded within the school, so it's holistic.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I'm going to go to the next screen, and I'm hoping I don't know who, it was Adam that asked the other question. Maybe when we're on that screen, maybe Adam, he might want to come on screen and ask us more questions if we don't answer his question.
That's lovely. Thanks, Liz.
Okay. Now this screen, sorry, make sure I'm on the right page. It's kind of connected to the last one, really, in the sense that, you know, why do something different, or the value of the tasks that are happening in classrooms on occasions when I feel like I'm being challenged about inclusive practice. Some of the questions at the top of this screen are what will be presented to me. So, you know, we'll walk around the school and they'll say, well, why is everybody doing that, and she's colouring this, or why you know, why are you doing death by matching, or yeah, there'd be various comments, and in my mind they're value judgments about what the child is engaging in as learning. So I just thought it would be useful for us to just kind of talk about some of our responses to these types of questions.
And we also spoke about, didn't we, about how very difficult it is for an external person to make those value judgments when you do not know the children.
You can't.
The children are the key to everything that they do, and everything that's built around them is because it will meet a specific need for that child. Yeah,
and I think that's really, it's so important for Senkos to have that in their bank of armoury, that it's very, very difficult for somebody to come and make a value judgment about the quality or the intent of a learning task if they don't know the child, because we know with all of our complex children that their learning profile will be unique, and what they need to do and what they need to learn will be unique to them. So just a few examples, really. For example, why colour in an Egyptian god? There's lots of things that are important about colouring. I think colouring is always kind of seen down as a dumbed down task, but actually it does a lot of it has a lot of skills involved that are really important for lots of other things. It aids concentration, it builds fine motor and finger grip and coordination, and it supports early writing skills. It gives creativity, it can give colour awareness, and it can give children a sense of achievement. The sentence I put at the top is, it's important for children that their learning is accessible and achievable. They want to be able to do things that they are successful at, interwoven into challenging targets, into challenging tasks. They need to be successful. So yes, that's my one. Are you, I think you're next.
Yeah, we have, I've had questions about why copyright and what's the point in overwriting yellow letters. But again, it's about the skills involved within that task, as well as them being measurable, accessible and achievable. So overwriting and copywriting does provide children who do not learn phonetically with opportunities to learn words and process words as images. And so overwriting and copywriting are the key components for this. Like, just like every child learns differently, we are finding ways that help children learn in a specific way that is beneficial to them.
Then you've got the matching one. I've often heard the death by matching quote. There's so much that you can do with matching. Matching is such an important part of reading. It's a pre-reading skill, and it enables pupils to obtain comprehension of key vocabulary. And we know that it increases cognitive activation, and it's a central part of comprehension. So if you don't understand an instruction, that might be because you haven't had the opportunity to match vocab to understanding. There's actually lots of complexity that can come with matching. Yes, you start by matching picture to picture, but it can go word to picture, word to word, word to retrieval, match my object to your word. There's so much that can happen in matching that actually develops vocabulary, and it enables children to understand what's going on. So I'm a big fan of the progressive line of matching.
And then all I see is cutting and sticking. Okay, so cutting and sticking is something, a skill. Cutting is a skill that builds and develops lifelong skills. So it helps with a range of fine motor movements, It helps to be able to use cutlery in other areas of life, hand-eye coordination, independent movement of fingers, strength hand movement, bilateral coordination skills. The list is pretty much endless as to why cutting and sticking is a beneficial skill to be learning alongside other children in their classrooms.
Okay. Okay, this screen it's just a good steal if Syncos need something to steal. This basically is what we will do when we're asking someone to variate a lesson. So it's a little bit like a backward chaining exercise. You would typically develop your lesson with your learning objective that is for everybody, and then you break it down to the key words so that you can simplify it and take it right back. So for example, if you've got, I don't know, you might have a class of 14-year-olds, but you need somebody that is perhaps developmentally around 4 or 5, and you need there to be a learning experience that is valuable for both groups of people. So you simplify it by using the keywords, and then what you would do, obviously it says autism here because that is our specialism, but it could be for any need. You need to make it meaningful for that child. So you take something that is valuable to them, something that either is related to everyday living, or a skill that you know that they need to reinforce, or something that is the most useful from the objective that you've got. And then what we do is we strip it back to make it accessible. So we put visuals on it, we put symbols on it, we'll put signs alongside it, we'll put objects alongside it, and then we would create a learning task that is specific for that child. Where possible, you'll intertwine their targets alongside the experience of the theme. So the example beforehand, I think, was Egyptians. You might be in a lesson about Egyptians, the theme would remain that, but the skill might be something very different for your child that's developmentally working at a very different level. Then what you'd do is you'd look at assessing it in terms of their learning towards their targets. Okay, benefits of inclusion for typical children. I think these are almost unmeasurable. I think Jim talked a little bit about it in the first presentation about the positive influence it has on children. It definitely makes and creates a much more humanistic climate, and all of the children are so responsive to each other, and I think it's almost something you can't put in words. You have to see it and feel it to understand it, but we don't have negative attitudes towards our children because our children have grown up together. They don't see the difference that other people in the wider world may see. They just don't see it. It's just somebody else in their class, and that's very much when we were talking about learning activities being different. It's really important that the children see that they are all doing the same things and learning the same things. So it might only be a tentative connection to the theme that you're doing in the classroom, but everybody in that class will say, oh, we're learning about Romans. And it may be that the person that is supported might be learning about body parts using a Roman soldier. It might be something slightly different, but in their world, they're all doing the same thing. So that's really important. I think it improves children's levels of concentration. I had an interesting experience when I was working as a lead on an autism provision, and we had a new head teacher who came in. She was almost helicoptered into the playground. She was kind of dropped in overnight, and she was alarmed by the variety of needs that were in the classrooms. She was temporary head after a very difficult period in a school, and she basically said that she wanted the children to be taken out of the dinner hall and taken out of the classes. And obviously I was having a nervous breakdown, so I basically went back to her and said, look, okay, can you let me do some data collection? Can you let me do some research? I'm not going to take them out yet, but I'm going to look at the impact that you feel that they may be having. I did lots of counting and collating of data, and basically what I found in that model was that the dining hall wasn't louder if those children were there, and I also found that the attention of the typically developing children are stronger in classes where they've got children with complex needs. They are so used to like vocal engagements in the room, or people would say disruptions. They are so used to it from such a young age that their concentration levels, they don't even turn around. I remember being in an observation and said person was standing on the chair and banging, and they didn't even look, they weren't looking up. They're so used to attending and concentrating to their teacher. So I believe that children's concentration levels are stronger. Pupils who attend inclusive settings, I feel, are less selfish, less looking at, self-absorbed or looking inwards, and then definitely more skilled at supporting others. Their ability to sign, their ability to just use gentle gesture to help people is really, really good. It raises children's awareness of difference and helps them develop respect for all children. It helps to prepare them for the real world where they live in an inclusive society. And I think, you know, as I'm quite old and I grew up in an education system where disability wasn't always visible, and I didn't necessarily see that until college years. I think the benefits of it for children is really, really important. Access to a wide range of resources and teachers that are skilled in seeing the learning journey from the beginning to the end. I think all the CPD that Katie does is so valuable in understanding all of our children. So because people are skilled at variating, they're skilled at variating for children with EAL, they're skilled at variating for children with visual impairments. We've got skills that they can utilise for lots and lots of different things, and I think it brings out the best for all children. It's important that children focus on what children can do rather than what they lack, and children naturally acknowledge the achievements of pupils with SEND, and I think that's in the nature of children. They'll get super excited when somebody kind of gets over a barrier or is able to do something, and I think they can be inspired by children that are up against it and are challenged, a little bit like Jim when he talked about the judo lesson. When your child in your class does something like that, you're super proud of them, and they all come to the dinner hall and tell you what has happened, because they're so proud of their peer. Oh Lord, sorry, what have I done? Okay. You could be inspired, should have shown strength and courage. Developing skills, engaging with others that have difficulties. Oh, sign language, I kind of covered that. Okay, I don't know whether Adam wants to ask anything else about that screen, or he wants to unmute himself and say. Adam? Has he left? No, I'm joking. Okay, I'm going to go on. And then if Adam is there and he wants to interject, he's more than welcome. Okay, next screen. Okay, benefits of inclusion for children with SEN. It increases their social skills and communication skills using typically developing peers as their models. Learning taking place in varied environments, I think, helps them maintain their motivation. Okay, yeah, so learning in lots of different environments helps them to generalise, basically, is what that comment is, that statement is saying. It gives them increased opportunities for interaction and models of social behaviour skills. They experience a more complex environment that I talked about earlier, stimulates their development. Children have greater opportunity to access the national curriculum when they're in typical classrooms, and we feel that expectations in inclusive environments are higher and driven by the success of all. Okay, I don't know if the title on this page is the right title, the risks. I'm not sure it is the risks, but there are some concerns, I would say, about making sure if you're working in separate rooms all of the time, that these things don't happen. So teachers tend to treat children who are segregated as less able than they are. The research shows us that. We know that as soon as they're taken out of the classroom, the expectations of them typically are lower. And that's an important one if you are working in separate rooms that you address. I'm not saying it's not possible to address them. I'm just saying it's more difficult to address it. So it needs to be something that's on the agenda and thought about. Children in groups that are seen as other can, not always, but it can expose them to more negative ridicule. And if it's managed well, if it's led well, then maybe it doesn't happen. But I think the general philosophy is that anything that's other can create negativity. Enclosed specialist spaces do not allow children to develop a breadth of coping strategies for dynamic environments. We've spoken about that already, so I hope that's clear. And then again, I've spoken about this, lack of strong role models in enclosed specialist environments limits children's access to copy. And copying is so, so important. Okay, and I think we are on to questions. So I might stop sharing and come back to screen.
Fantastic. Thank you, Liz and Katie.
Is there anybody still on the call?
We have lots of people on the call. A brilliant presentation again. So feel really privileged to have been a part of this morning, because the depth and breadth of information and experience that you've shared with us is just simply priceless. So thank you on behalf of NDTi and on behalf of our entire participant audience. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. Now we get to this point in the morning, well, afternoon now, folks, where we have the opportunity of raising some questions. And I think, you know, we've had some really interesting questions that have come up in the chat. Adam says, thank you very much for asking his question. He was, at the time, he was just covering the childcare responsibilities that he has at the moment. Lots of messages around accessing the SEN Policy Research Forum. So thanks to Alice and Julie for sharing that with colleagues this morning as well. So do take a look at the SEN Policy Research Forum.co.uk web address there. Masses of information there that really sort of keeps us on our toes in terms of how policy and areas of policy really do inform the direction that we take within the inclusive education marketplace. And I think also there's been a general sort of sense within the chat that the conversations that we're having both this morning and I imagine throughout the rest of this week through our Inclusive EdFest events, that actually people are getting on board and momentum will begin to build as the week progresses. And one of your slides we talked about earlier, which was around almost describing a charter for inclusion. And the response in the chat has been really, really positive around that. And certainly as a board member at NDTi, one of the things that I can do is to influence some of the decisions we take within the organisation to enable our leaders within the organisation to really enable that to happen, to look at how we could develop a national charter for inclusion. And I'm particularly interested to see what the strength of feeling is around that particular suggestion. So I think what your presentation has done this morning is prompt almost a bit of a call to action through the chat that we've got the privilege of accessing here. So I'm going to open the floor, folks, which again is a little bit radical, given that we're virtual, given that there are so many of us on the screen. So what I would suggest is that you use your raising of the hand to indicate if you would like to ask a question, whilst we've still got Liz and Katie available to us. Any questions, folks? Don't be shy. Yeah, the inclusion quality marks just popped up. Thanks, Lisa, for sharing that. The inclusion quality mark are a company that are in place to provide an inclusion charter mark. So again, you know, lots of opportunities here to work with other partners that contribute to the overall ambition of developing a much more inclusive educational offer more generally for all children and young people that are accessing our schools and settings. So you're absolutely right, Lisa. This is not a piece of work in terms of that charter, that national charter for inclusion that needs to be undertaken by NDTi. There will be hundreds of stakeholders that will want to contribute to that, and I think NDTi are perfectly placed to facilitate that piece of work happening. So I think it'll be interesting, won't it, on the back of national SEND review outcomes, to look at how we can place a national charter for inclusion that we could enable all local areas to sign up to, all key stakeholder groups to sign up to and to support. So your presentation, Katie and Liz, is being described as inspiring and full of useful information. So thank you. You've really hit the mark this morning, clearly for all of us. Just to let all participants know that access to the slide packs will be made available, and I understand as well, I'm looking at Julie on screen, I understand that the recording of the sessions as well will also be made available post-event. Yeah,
we're going to find a space on the website to put them up for people. I just note as well, Jane, there's a comment in the chat from Helen Jackson. I don't know if she might want to come on. She's asking about increased attention skills and preparation for real life when children learn to focus if brought up in an inclusive school. Helen, are you there? Do you want to ask your question? Please do.
Yes, I actually will declare that I am actually a teacher of the deaf. But have worked most of my life in a resource space which was very inclusive from years and years ago in a first school. So I can understand a lot of what's been shared in that last presentation. But I think generally, I think one has to also be very careful when we're talking about the impact of sensory issues, whether it be the sensory integration issues and which we mentioned about how do you manage for children where there's maybe autism and things. And yes, you have to give them the opportunities, but for encouraging and allowing a lot of children, considering huge numbers of children up to the age of 8, I mean, 25% of your younger population may well have varying hearing loss, for example. I think I would be concerned if we gave the impression that just having children shouting out and doing this, that and the other and being on the move is always going to be inclusive enough for environment for the child with a hearing loss, particularly if there's more than, well, even a minor loss. And I presume in what Liz was saying, that you would be balancing out whether the child can still work in small groups and things. And the dining room one is a big one for some children with hearing loss, because it means you cut down your social interaction. So I was just reflecting back on, I think, the first speaker today, where the school was designed from the beginning. And the trouble is, a lot of us are working in schools that have not been designed from the beginning, and obviously acoustic conditions are often absolutely desperate, as all teachers know. And, you know, I think we're back to that situation. True inclusion probably works best when the physical environment is designed to allow every child to be included. So a bit long-winded, but I'm just interested in whether, Liz, you mentioned visual impairment, but also have you had quite experience where children have got a lot of hearing loss?
We don't currently have, no, sorry, we do have one child has some hearing loss. But in answer to your question, I think there's a couple of things. I think perhaps the example I used earlier, I wouldn't expect it to be a typical experience that you've been someone standing on a chair shouting. That was just to demonstrate a point in the sense that the children are used to some of those challenges, so they don't turn and they don't focus on it. What I would say is, one, in terms of kind of buildings, but also in terms of expectations, we expect a very, very quiet space
Yeah.
as a whole, as a
point.
learning environment anyway.
Yeah.
So that's one of our non-negotiable standards, irrespective of pupil. So our dining hall, you do not talk in the line, you only use your whisper voices at the table. They're very clear rules, they're the same every day, and you must abide by them because it makes the environment easier for everybody else. Obviously, our children with complex needs don't necessarily follow those two rules, but it makes the environment better for them. And the same in class. We have an oracy session within a week. You do not talk freely in classrooms, and that's about you have time where you do pair share, and when you're working there is no discussion, that is silent when you're working. So I think what we've done over the years, if we've adapted other expectations of all our typical environment, our typical pupils, to enable the best possible environment for everybody. I mean, that may not answer your question in its entirety, but it kind of gives you a sense that generally calm and purposeful is the mode, and that hopefully that benefits everyone.
Yeah, I think I totally agree, because I always felt that if you were providing for the children that I was working with in the class situation, I was team teaching or whatever, actually the skills and strategies that are set up in a good classroom benefit everyone.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for that. At some point, would you like to clarify for me or send me to a site to explain the term variation as opposed to differentiation, to clarify what you mean in that term
so
at some point?
In my mind, I'll try and do it quickly. Differentiation is when you could be doing very different tasks from an objective.
Yeah.
Variation is when you're doing the same task.
Okay.
With varied resources.
Thank you. That's a term I haven't particularly heard, but it describes a good way of looking at inclusion and things too. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you for your questions, Helen. Okay, we have another hand raised.
I think it's me, Jane, Linda. I just wanted to say that Cleves was built from scratch to be inclusive, but I remember that the first head teacher, Bridget, when people said, well, it's all right for you, you've got a perfect building, she used to say, I could do this in any building. The building, it's great that we've got some advantages, but actually, if I had a Victorian, 3-level school with a little bit of money for adaptations, I could still run an inclusive school. So the building is, has got some advantages, but on the other hand, it's about everything that we've heard this morning.
Yeah, we're informed. Sorry, I was just saying we're in a 3-storey massive Victorian old building, and we're just about to have a lift fitted, which is very exciting.
Well, hey, that's great. Thanks, Liz. that is very exciting.
It is.
I just want to add to that, having been a former special school teacher and head teacher, and also a parent of a young person with additional needs who didn't access the special school system, went to a highly inclusive mainstream school, and had various challenges along the way. I think the temptation for us as leaders is to actually view some of the barriers that environmentally we're challenged by, and for me that is just simply a non-argument, that actually part of our challenge as leaders is to be very solution focused, which you talked about earlier in your presentation, and indeed so did Jim and Saab as well earlier this morning. And I think also for me, talking from my parental perspective, life is full of challenges. So actually it's about tooling up our children and our young people with the necessary skills and aptitudes and abilities to recognise that challenges will continue to exist in life. So our main focus as educators, as leaders of inclusive schools and settings, is not simply to keep removing constantly all of those barriers. Sometimes we have to enable children to get over those themselves. Life is messy, life is tricky. and we need to enable, as they prepare for adulthood, to be as self-sufficient, as independent as possible by the time they leave us at 16, 18 and beyond. So and that's an enormous challenge, isn't it? And I think to add to that level of challenge, it requires a huge demand on our educational system, practices and policies around how well we personalise that response. So we're going to have to shape and reshape. And I'm reminded of a colleague, a head teacher colleague of mine up in the Northwest some years ago, where we were sharing a drink one evening together. We're talking about respective areas of work, and I happened to let it slip that myself and my senior leadership team had spent the last couple of days reworking the curriculum offer for our school in advance of our new September cohort. And she looked at me a little bit quizzically and she said, "What do you mean you've revamped the curriculum offer?" And I said, "Well, we do it annually, you know, sometimes we have to do it mid-year, you know, but actually what we do is we look at the cohort, we look at the profile of needs, and we adapt, we make significant changes where it's necessary to make significant change, to adapt to meet the profile, the ever-changing profile of pupil needs as our intake grows and changes over time." And she was blown away by that. And I equally was blown away that she, in fact, wasn't doing that in her school. So I think we meet the challenge of change, of being adaptive, of being really responsive to how we meet the needs of all of our children in very different ways. So I'm just reminded of that particular situation. The end of that story is, of course, is that she went away inspired to go and do something very, very similar. And she went on to become a very successful chief exec of a large multi-academy trust of schools up in the Northwest. And they're all still doing that today. So, you know, for me, this is about how we influence practice, how we really shape inclusive schooling for the future by the sharing of the work that you do in the way that you have this morning. So our thanks to Jim and Saab this morning, and our thanks as well to you both here this morning, Liz and Katie too. I just want to get on a train and come and visit you all. So I will be emailing colleagues down in Newham to set up a visit, hopefully, you know, towards the back end of the summer term, maybe early autumn term. So put me on your visitor list, please. Just want to say a big thank you to all participants this morning for joining us. Do feel that you are now connected in the wider NDTi network of support. Our website has masses and masses of resources for you to access for free, to download, take a particularly good long look at our Preparation for Adulthood website, because we host that on behalf of the Department for Education and also a range of other partners too. Masses of information there, really high quality resource, guidance, training opportunities too. So don't forget that you are now within the NDTi family by virtue of accessing our Inclusive EdFest events this week. So thank you all for joining us.